You can't seriously expect us to believe this nonsense. High Commander Zixtal clicked his mandibles in what his species considered laughter. A species that evolved on a world with higher gravity than Craxus? Preposterous. First Officer Valara rolled all four of her eyes, a gesture she'd practiced extensively since being assigned to this particular commander. Sir, with all due respect, the data from the long-range sensors is quite clear. The inhabitants of Sol 3 exist on a planet with 1.3 times our own gravity. And that's just the beginning of what makes their world interesting. The command center of the Craxian exploration vessel, Eternal Dawn, hummed with the usual background noise of machinery and crew chittering, but there was an unusual tension in the air. The Craxians had long considered themselves the galaxy's premier Deathworlders, the only known sentient species to evolve on a high-gravity planet with extreme weather patterns and aggressive fauna. It was a point of considerable pride among their people. Well then, Zixtal leaned back in his reinforced command chair, his exoskeleton creaking slightly. Enlighten me about these supposed fellow Deathworlders. What makes their little rock so special? Valara pulled up the sensor data on the main view screen, her fingers dancing across the haptic interface. Where should I begin? Perhaps with the fact that their atmosphere contains a highly corrosive gas mixture that would be lethal to most species? They breathe oxygen. Yes, the same substance that causes metals to rust, as a primary component of their atmosphere. Fascinating. The commander's antennae twitched with genuine interest now. But surely they've engineered themselves to survive such conditions. No, sir. Valara's voice carried a note of barely contained excitement. They evolved naturally in these conditions. In fact, they require oxygen to survive. But it gets better. Their planet experiences extreme temperature variations, from freezing to scorching, sometimes in the same region within a single planetary rotation. Zixtal's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of growing agitation. And they survive this how? Valara double-checked her readings, still barely believing them herself. They simply adapt. They've developed technology, yes, but many of them choose to live in areas with seasonal temperature swings of over 50 degrees. They seem to enjoy it. The commander's carapace took on a slightly paler shade of blue. Enjoy it? Are they insane? That's not even the most interesting part, Valara continued, warming to her subject. Their planet has active plate tectonics. The ground literally moves beneath their feet. They build cities on top of fault lines, next to active volcanoes, and in tornado-prone regions. They surf on liquid water waves during electrical storms for recreation. Now I know you're making this up, Zixtal chittered nervously. No sentient species would willingly... He was interrupted by a priority alert from the sensor array. Valara quickly pulled up the new data, her compound eyes widening. Sir, we're receiving a transmission. It's coming from a small vessel that just appeared at the edge of our sensor range. They seem to have detected us despite our stealth systems. Impossible! We're running silent with our best cloaking technology. Nothing could... The transmission is audio-visual, sir. Should I put it on screen? Zixtal's antennae drooped slightly, but he nodded. Might as well see what we're dealing with. The view screen flickered to life, revealing a sight that caused several junior officers to skitter backward in alarm. The being on screen was tall, with smooth pink-beige exterior covering instead of a proper exoskeleton. It showed far too many teeth in what they would later learn was called a smile. Greetings, Craxian vessel! The human's voice boomed through the speakers. This is Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth ship Curiosity. We noticed you checking us out and thought we'd pop by to say hello. Hope we didn't startle you. Our quantum sensors are pretty good at picking up cloaked ships these days. Zixtal's mandibles worked silently for several seconds before he found his voice. How did you approach without our detecting your drive signature? The human's facial features arranged themselves into an even more alarming display of teeth. Oh, that. We've been experimenting with some new stealth tech. Turns out if you modulate your warp field just right, you can surf the quantum foam without leaving much of a wake. Pretty cool, right? Surf the... Zixtal turned to Valara. Are they saying they've weaponized quantum mechanics for propulsion? Actually, Captain Chen continued, apparently able to hear them perfectly despite their supposedly secure internal communications. We mostly developed it for deep space racing. The quantum wake masking was just a nice bonus. Say, would you folks like to come aboard? We've got a fresh pot of coffee brewing, and I'd love to share stories about your homeworld. We don't meet many other Deathworlders out here. The Craxian command crew exchanged nervous glances. They had evolved on what the galaxy considered a death world, true, but these humans had taken one look at the deadly forces of nature and decided to turn them into sporting events. We would be honored, Zixtal managed, his translator struggling to convey the complex mixture of terror and fascination in his voice. Excellent! Captain Chen clapped her hands together, causing several Craxian officers to flinch. Fair warning, though. Our artificial gravity is set to Earth normal. We can lower it if that's more comfortable for you. Valara quickly did the calculations and felt her thorax constrict. Earth normal gravity would be significantly higher than what they were used to, even as Deathworlders themselves. That won't be necessary, Zixtal said, his pride winning out over his common sense. We can manage. Fantastic. We'll prep the docking tube. Oh, and don't worry about the oxygen content in our atmosphere. We've got some excellent environmental suits you can use. They're rated for everything from vacuum to crush depth at the bottom of Europa's ocean. We use them for extreme sports sometimes. As the transmission ended, Zixtal turned to his first officer. Valara, please tell me I'm hallucinating from bad nutrient paste. Did we just agree to board a vessel crewed by beings who treat lethal environmental conditions as entertainment? Yes, sir, Valara confirmed, already updating her will on her personal device. Though I believe they prefer the term extreme sports enthusiasts. The docking procedure went smoothly enough, though the Craxian crew couldn't help but notice that the human ship's hull bore what appeared to be scorch marks and impact craters. Captain Chen had cheerfully explained these as souvenirs from something called asteroid dodging competitions. As they made their way through the airlock in their borrowed environmental suits, which were indeed impressively engineered, the higher gravity immediately made itself felt. The Craxians found themselves having to engage their auxiliary leg muscles just to stay upright. Sorry about the gravity, Captain Chen said, bouncing slightly on her toes in a way that made the visitors distinctly uncomfortable. We actually keep it a bit lower than Earth standard when we're not entertaining guests. Makes for better zero-G training transitions. She led them through corridors that seemed to have been designed by someone with a profound disrespect for the conventional laws of spacecraft architecture. Handholds and foot anchors covered every surface, including the ceiling, and some passages appeared to be deliberately oriented at odd angles. Our ship's layout takes some getting used to, Chen explained, noting their confusion. We found that traditional designs were too boring, so we went with what we call a parkour-optimized layout. Keeps the crew agile and provides entertainment during long deployments. You intentionally made your ship more difficult to navigate? Zixtal asked, his translator struggling to convey the concept without triggering a logic error. Of course, can't let our spatial awareness skills get rusty out here in the black. Besides, it's great for emergency training. Speaking of which, she checked a display on her wrist. We're actually due for a random gravity failure drill in about 10 minutes. Don't worry, though. The environmental suits have built-in inertial dampeners. Before any of the Craxians could properly process this information, they arrived at what appeared to be the ship's recreational area. The space was dominated by various pieces of exercise equipment that looked more like torture devices to the visitors' eyes. Several crew members were engaged in activities that seemed to deliberately court physical harm. That's Jeff on the climbing wall. Chen pointed to a human suspended upside down on an overhang. And over there's Dr. Wong in the centrifuge. She's working on a theory about enhanced cognitive function under extreme G-forces. Claims she does her best quantum calculations at 3G. Valara's scientific curiosity temporarily overcame her survival instinct. You mean to tell us that your species not only survives but actively seeks out conditions that would kill most life forms? Well, yeah. Chen shrugged, a gesture the Craxians were beginning to associate with imminent distress. Life's no fun without a little challenge, right? Here, let me show you our hydroponics bay. We've been experimenting with growing ghost peppers in variable gravity. As they followed their host, Zixtal sent a private message to Valara through their suit's communication system. First Officer, please make a note in the official record. Any future first contact scenarios with human vessels should be preceded by a full medical evaluation of our crew, and perhaps a psychiatric assessment. Already done, sir, Valara replied. Though I must admit, their approach to environmental hazards is intriguing. From a purely scientific perspective, of course. Their conversation was interrupted by a cheerful announcement over the ship's speakers. Attention all hands. Random gravity failure drill beginning in 5 minutes. Reminder, last one to reach their emergency station has to eat Dave's experimental fermented hot sauce. The Craxians watched in horror as the human crew responded to this threat with enthusiasm rather than appropriate terror. Oh, perfect timing, Chen beamed at them. You'll get to see how we handle emergency protocols. Don't worry if you can't keep up. We've had lots of practice. Though I should warn you, Dave's hot sauce is actually pretty mild by human standards. We only use it as a deterrent because he's still working on the recipe. As the gravity began to fluctuate, Zixtal made a mental note to update the Craxian first contact protocols. Clearly, their definition of Deathworlder needed serious revision. Any species that voluntarily ate corrosive substances for pleasure clearly operated on a different level of reality. Several harrowing hours later, the Craxian delegation prepared to return to their own ship. They had witnessed humans treating near-death experiences as entertainment, using potentially lethal substances as condiments, and discussing plans for something called extreme orbital skydiving with disturbing enthusiasm. This has been most educational, Zixtal managed, his exoskeleton still quivering slightly from the combined effects of high gravity and witnessing human recreational activities. Hasn't it, though? Chen agreed cheerfully. We'd love to visit your world sometime. Your variable atmospheric pressure zones sound fascinating. Think of the diving possibilities. Valara, who had been uncharacteristically quiet since watching a human crew member demonstrate something called zero-G parkour, finally spoke up. Captain Chen, if I may ask, why? Why do your people seek out such dangerous situations? The human captain's expression turned thoughtful. You know, we get that question a lot from other species. I think it's because we've always believed that the only way to truly understand something is to push its boundaries. Sure, we could live in perfectly regulated environments and never take risks, but where's the growth in that? Every time we survive something that should have killed us, we learn a little more about ourselves and the universe. She grinned, causing several Craxians to involuntarily step backward. Besides, it's fun. Speaking of which, we're organizing an interspecies extreme sports tournament next month. Would your people be interested in... We'll have to check our schedule, Zixtal interrupted hastily. Military duties, you understand. Of course, Chen nodded sympathetically. Well, if you change your mind, here's my contact info. We're always looking for new perspectives on what constitutes extreme. Though I should warn you, the Andromedans from NGC 7793 are already signed up, and they evolved on a planet with active antimatter volcanoes. As they made their way back to their own ship, Valara turned to her commander. Sir, about our previous classification as the galaxy's premier Deathworlders. Yes, Zixtal sighed. Update the database. But Valara... Sir, let's keep this encounter classified for now. I'm not sure our people are ready to know that somewhere out there's a species that looks at the most hostile environments in the universe and thinks, I wonder if I can surf that. Back on the Curiosity, Captain Chen watched the Craxian ship disappear into FTL with a satisfied smile. Well, that went well. They seemed like nice folks, even if they were a bit jumpy. Hey, Dave, how's that new batch of hot sauce coming along? Great, came the reply from the ship's kitchen. I finally got the plutonium ratio just right. Want to be the first to try it? Chen laughed and headed toward the kitchen. Just another day in the life of humanity's ambassadors to the galaxy, spreading terror and confusion through their unique approach to what other species called survival. In the years that followed, the galaxy would come to accept certain universal truths. Space is vast, physics is weird, and if you find something that every other species agrees is completely unsurvivable, there's probably a human somewhere trying to turn it into an extreme sport. As for the Craxians, they eventually did attend that interspecies tournament. They came in third in the high-gravity gymnastics event, though they still refused to acknowledge human competitive volcano surfing as a legitimate sport. Some things, they maintain, are better left to the truly insane, or as humans prefer to be called, adrenaline enthusiasts. 6 standard galactic months after their first encounter with humans, the Craxian High Command received an invitation they couldn't ignore. If only because it arrived via a small probe that had somehow penetrated all their defensive systems, while broadcasting what the humans called party music. They're calling it the first annual Intergalactic Extreme Sports and Survival Championship, Valara reported, her antennae twitching as she read from the holographic display. The tagline is, because death is just another challenge. Commander Zixtal, who had only recently stopped having nightmares about human recreational activities, clicked his mandibles in resignation. Please tell me we're not seriously considering this. Actually, sir. Valara's carapace took on the slight purplish tinge that indicated embarrassment. Several of our younger officers have already submitted applications. It seems our encounter with the curiosity may have inspired them. Inspired? Or corrupted, Zixtal muttered, but he knew it was too late. Ever since word of their encounter with the humans had leaked, despite his best efforts to keep it classified, a disturbing trend had emerged among the younger generation of Craxians. They had begun to question why they limited themselves to merely surviving their harsh homeworld when they could, as the humans put it, totally shred those killer storms, bro. The invitation probe chose that moment to project a new message, causing several bridge officers to jump in surprise. Captain Chen's familiar face appeared, still showing far too many teeth. Hey there, Craxian friends. Just wanted to give you a heads up about some of the events we've got planned. Don't worry, we've designed everything with multi-species safety in mind. Mostly. We've got gravity wrestling, atmospheric diving, temporal parkour, still working out some kinks in the time dilation, but that's half the fun. And of course, the crowd favorite, competitive black hole surfing. Competitive black hole surfing? Zixtal repeated each word carefully, hoping they might make more sense individually. They didn't. Oh, don't worry, we're using very small black holes, Chen assured them. Barely a solar mass each. The real challenge is riding the accretion disk without getting spaghettified. But that's what the temporal shields are for. Valara, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. Captain Chen, regarding the temporal parkour event, what exactly are the rules? Zixtal turned all four of his eye stalks to stare at his first officer in horror. Valara, no. Valara, yes! Chen's grin somehow grew even wider. It's pretty straightforward. Contestants have to navigate an obstacle course that exists in multiple temporal states simultaneously. You might start a jump in the past, transit through the present, and stick the landing in one of several possible futures. Points are deducted for creating paradoxes or accidentally erasing yourself from existence. That's not how time works, Zixtal protested. Not with that attitude it isn't, Chen winked. But don't worry, we've got great insurance coverage. Our policy even includes alternate timeline compensation. Before Zixtal could formulate a response that adequately conveyed his species' stance on casually violating the fundamental laws of physics, another human appeared in the projection. This one was wearing what appeared to be a suit made entirely of temperature-resistant materials and sporting several scorch marks. Sarah, the Andromedans just arrived and they've brought their antimatter volleyball team. We're setting up the containment field now, but you might want to hurry. They're talking about adding a quantum tunneling modifier to make it more exciting. Ooh, gotta run! Chen's eyes lit up with an enthusiasm that Zixtal had come to associate with imminent disaster. Don't forget to RSVP by next week. Oh, and bring snacks. The Epsilon Eridani delegation is handling the main catering, but their idea of spicy is just gamma radiation. We're hoping for some variety. The projection winked out, leaving the Craxian command crew in stunned silence. Finally, Valara spoke. Sir, about those applications from our junior officers. Let me guess. Zixtal sighed. You want to approve them? Actually, I was going to suggest we accompany them. Purely in a supervisory capacity, of course. Someone needs to ensure they don't get carried away with all this human nonsense. Zixtal noticed she was already pulling up the temporal parkour registration form on her personal device. Besides, she continued, her antennae quivering with barely contained excitement. Think of the scientific opportunities. The Andromedans' antimatter control techniques alone could revolutionize our energy systems. Assuming we survive watching them play volleyball with it, Zixtal muttered. But he knew he was fighting a losing battle. The humans had awakened something in his people, a realization that perhaps simply surviving on a death world wasn't enough. Maybe, just maybe, they could learn to thrive in the face of impossible odds, too. Fine. He clicked his mandibles in resignation. Approve the applications. But Valara? Yes, sir? If anyone asks me to try something called orbital skydiving, I'm invoking emergency command protocols and ordering an immediate retreat. Of course, sir. Valara's antennae twitched in what he strongly suspected was amusement. Though you might be interested to know that the orbital skydiving event includes a zero-G chess tournament during freefall. Zixtal pretended not to hear her as he retreated to his quarters to update his will. Again, something told him this tournament would either be the greatest advancement in interspecies relations since first contact, or the most spectacular mass insurance claim in galactic history. Probably both. The tournament venue was, in typical human fashion, completely insane. They had somehow constructed a massive space station in orbit around a binary star system. with various event zones extending out into space in a pattern that Valara's navigation systems insisted was geometrically impossible. "Welcome to the Crucible!" Captain Chen's voice boomed over the station's communications system as the Craxian delegation approached their designated docking bay. Please note that some areas of the station exist in probabilistic spacetime. Don't worry if you occasionally run into yourself. Just remember the temporal high-five protocol we covered in the safety briefing. What safety briefing? Zixtal demanded, just as a data packet downloaded itself into their ship's systems. The file was helpfully labeled, "So you've decided to mess with the fundamental forces of the universe, a beginner's guide." "The one you're about to have already attended yesterday," Chen replied cheerfully. "Time zones are a bit fluid around here. Speaking of which, could you keep an eye out for my past self? I'm supposed to warn me about the antimatter volleyball incident, but I keep missing myself in the cafeteria." As they docked, Valara was already deep into the safety briefing documents, her compound eyes widening with each swipe of the screen. "Sir, according to this, we're required to maintain a minimum of 3 parallel timelines at all times. Apparently, it's to ensure we have backup copies in case of accidental existence failure." "Existence failure isn't supposed to be a thing that can happen," Zixtal chittered in distress. But he had to admit, the station was an impressive sight. Through the viewport, he could see what appeared to be a zero-gravity obstacle course that wrapped around itself in a Mobius strip. Several containment fields housing what looked suspiciously like miniature stars, and something the humans had labeled Extreme Rock Paper Scissors Arena, Quantum Edition. Their welcoming committee consisted of Captain Chen, 3 of her from different timelines, all wearing name tags indicating which century they were from. A group of Andromedans whose antimatter volleyball uniforms glowed with an unsettling purple light, and what appeared to be a sentient cloud of plasma wearing a staff badge. "Great to see you, again, for the first time," all 3 Chens said in perfect unison, which was somehow more disturbing than if they had spoken out of sync. "We've got you scheduled for the temporal parkour preliminaries in about -2 hours, so you might want to head there first, or last. The tense agreement gets a bit tricky around here." Valara, who had been quietly vibrating with excitement since they arrived, immediately pulled up the course map on her datapad. "Sir, with your permission, I'd like to—" "Go," Zixtal sighed. "But try not to create any grandfather paradoxes. The paperwork is murder." As his first officer scuttled off toward the temporal sports complex, Zixtal turned to the Chens. "I don't suppose you have anything a bit more conventional? Something that doesn't involve warping the fabric of reality?" "Oh, sure." Middle Chen, according to her name tag, she was from next Tuesday, brightened. "The gravity wrestling tournament is pretty straightforward. You just have to pin your opponent while the local gravitational constant randomly fluctuates between 0 and 12 times standard Earth gravity. We even installed safety cushions in case anyone gets thrown into last week." Before Zixtal could properly process this definition of straightforward, a commotion erupted from the direction of the antimatter volleyball court. One of the Andromedans had apparently served the ball with a bit too much spin, causing it to quantum tunnel through the containment field. "Don't panic!" Future Chen called out as klaxons began to wail. "This is why we installed the emergency universe reset button. Though if anyone sees a beach ball-sized sphere of antimatter heading their way, please notify the nearest temporal duplicate of myself, or just duck really fast." Zixtal watched in a mixture of horror and fascination as the humans and Andromedans scrambled to contain what should have been a catastrophic matter-antimatter reaction, but somehow turned it into an impromptu game of what they called quantum hot potato. "You know," said a voice beside him, and he turned to find himself face to face with himself. This other Zixtal's carapace showed signs of recent high-G exposure, and one of his antennae was slightly singed. "Let me guess." Present Zixtal clicked his mandibles. "You're me from the future?" "About 6 hours ahead," Future Zixtal confirmed. "Just wanted to warn you. When they offer you a spot in the black hole surfing exhibition match, say yes." "Why in the name of all rational physics would I do that?" Future Zixtal's compound eyes glittered with an unsettling light. "Because my past self. It turns out we're actually pretty good at it. 1 silver medal, in fact. Though I should mention, don't try to do a backflip off the event horizon. That's how we lost the gold to the Epsilon Eridani team." Present Zixtal watched his future self stride off toward what appeared to be a containment chamber, housing several microscopic black holes, each one labeled with helpful signs like beginner's slope and expert only, time dilation hazard. Meanwhile, Valara's voice came over his communicator. sounding slightly out of phase with normal space-time. "Sir, you won't believe this, but I just set a new course record in temporal parkour. Also, I may have accidentally become my own grandmother, but the judges say that's only a minor point deduction." As Zixtal watched a team of humans chase an antimatter volleyball through probability space while 3 versions of Captain Chen coordinated the pursuit across multiple timelines, he had a sudden realization. His species had spent generations being proud of their ability to survive on a death world. But the humans had taken survival to an entirely new level. They hadn't just learned to endure dangerous conditions, they had learned to bend those very conditions to their will, turning the deadly forces of the universe into a playground. And now, watching a young Craxian officer execute a perfect triple axel through a temporal fold while being cheered on by a crowd existing in 3 different time zones simultaneously, he realized his people were learning to do the same. "Captain Chen," he called out to whichever version of her was currently in his timeline, "about that black hole surfing exhibition." The human captain's face lit up with that now familiar dangerous grin. "I knew you'd come around. Don't worry. We've got plenty of spare temporal protection suits. They're a bit snug around the exoskeleton, but they'll keep you from getting stretched into infinity if you fall into the singularity." "That's reassuring," Zixtal clicked dryly. "Though I have to ask, why do humans do all this? Why turn the deadliest phenomena in the universe into sports?" Chen. He thought it was the one from next Tuesday, but temporal drift was making it hard to be sure. Considered this for a moment. "You know how your people evolved on a death world and learned to survive it?" "Yes. Well, we evolved on a death world and decided to become friends with it instead. Sure, gravity can crush you, but it can also help you do awesome flips. Black holes can tear you apart, but they also make fantastic surfing waves if you catch them at the right angle. Antimatter explosions are just really enthusiastic high fives from the universe." As if to punctuate her point, a cheer went up from the volleyball court as someone, probably human, managed to return a serve by riding the wave of a controlled matter-antimatter annihilation. "Now come on." She grabbed his upper manipulator with her strange, flexible appendage. "The black hole surfing qualifying round starts in -10 minutes, and you've got a silver medal to win." And so, Commander Zixtal of the Craxian High Command, who had once considered his people the ultimate survivors of the galaxy, found himself being fitted for a temporal protection suit, while a helpful human explained the basics of using gravitational lensing to perform trick moves on the edge of a singularity. Somewhere in the background, he could hear Valara excitedly discussing the possibility of combining temporal parkour with antimatter volleyball for next year's tournament. The humans predictably loved the idea. The galaxy would never be the same, but maybe, just maybe, that was a good thing. "Ladies, gentlemen, beings of indeterminate or fluctuating states of existence, and all quantum superpositions thereof." Captain Chen's voice echoed through the grand hall of the Crucible. "Welcome to the closing ceremony of the first annual Intergalactic Extreme Sports and Survival Championship." The assembled crowd, representing species from across known, and several theoretically impossible space, erupted in cheers, antimatter flares, and what appeared to be localized time reversal waves. The massive chamber had been decorated with trophies that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously, allowing each participant to potentially see themselves as the winner until observed directly. Zixtal, still wearing his silver medal from the black hole surfing competition, which had somehow acquired the unusual property of occasionally emitting Hawking radiation, found himself seated at a table with Valara, 3 temporal duplicates of himself from various points in the tournament, and a being that claimed to be the collective future consciousness of the entire Andromedan volleyball team. "Before we begin the awards ceremony," Chen continued, "we'd like to acknowledge some of the week's most memorable moments. First, a round of applause for the Epsilon Eridani team, whose innovative approach to gravity wrestling resulted in the creation of a stable micro-universe. Our physics department is still studying it, and early reports suggest it's developing its own extreme sports." Valara, who had somehow managed to acquire enough temporal duplicates of herself to form an entire parkour team, leaned over to Zixtal. "Sir, about next year's event. I've been talking with some of the human organizers, and they're interested in our proposal for combining multiple disciplines." "Valara," Zixtal clicked warily, "please tell me you haven't suggested anything that could potentially unravel the fabric of space-time." "Of course not, sir." She managed to look offended with all 4 eyes. "The temporal mechanics department assured us that space-time is more of a suggestion anyway. Besides, They've already installed emergency reality anchors throughout the station. Before Zixtal could properly express his concerns about any sport requiring emergency reality anchors, Chen was continuing with the highlights. And let's not forget the incredible display of sportsmanship during the antimatter volleyball finals. Not only did the accidental quantum tunneling of the ball create a beautiful aurora in 6 dimensions, but the impromptu quantum hot potato game that followed has been officially recognized as our newest competitive event for next year. The Andromedan team's collective consciousness pulsed with pride, though they were still arguing with themselves about proper scoring rules across multiple probability streams. Valara scuttled up to the podium, somehow arriving both before and after her name was called. I'd like to thank myself, literally, and all my temporal duplicates who made this possible. Also, family reunions are going to be really interesting from now on. In the Best Adaptation of Lethal Physics category, Chen continued, the award goes to the Human Craxian Collaborative Team for their revolutionary gravitational slingshot boost technique in black hole surfing. Who knew you could use frame dragging for sick aerial tricks? Zixtal found himself being pushed toward the podium by several versions of himself, each one insisting that another timeline should give the acceptance speech. In the end, they compromised by speaking in perfect synchronization, which caused several temporal physicists in the audience to start furiously taking notes. The awards continued, each one more physics-defying than the last. The Epsilon Eridani team received special recognition for most efficient violation of thermodynamics in their approach to extreme temperature parkour. The Andromedans won Best Team Spirit quite literally, having achieved collective consciousness during a particularly intense volleyball rally. As the ceremony progressed, the laws of physics began to get a bit fuzzy around the edges, a common side effect of gathering so many reality-bending athletes in one place. Small temporal eddies swirled through the hall, occasionally causing acceptance speeches to be delivered before the awards were announced. A quantum probability cascade resulted in everyone simultaneously winning and not winning the most likely to create a stable time loop category. And finally, Chen announced, her voice somehow coming from all points in space-time simultaneously, we come to our special announcement about next year's championship. The room hushed, though the hush occurred several minutes after she started speaking, due to some lingering temporal distortion. Thanks to the overwhelming success of this year's events, and the creation of several exciting new fundamental forces during the freestyle competition, we're expanding. Next year's championship will include new categories such as competitive reality warping, extreme quantum entanglement, and by popular demand, synchronized existence failure recovery. The crowd erupted in cheers that propagated backward through time, causing everyone to be excited about the announcement before it happened. Additionally, Chen continued, we're pleased to announce that the Craxians have volunteered to host next year's anti-gravity wrestling preliminaries on their homeworld. Something about wanting to show the galaxy that high-gravity planets are for more than just survival? Zixtal turned all his eye stalks to stare at Valara, who somehow managed to look both innocent and smug simultaneously. When exactly did we volunteer for this? About 2 hours from now, sir, she replied cheerfully. Don't worry, I've already filled out the paperwork. Or I will have. Tenses are tricky in this part of the station. As the ceremony wound down, and up and sideways through several probability vectors, Zixtal found himself at the after-party, watching humans teach a group of young Craxian officers how to crowd surf in variable gravity fields. Nearby, the Andromedans were demonstrating their new volleyball serves, each one bending probability just enough to make returning the shot an exercise in quantum mechanics. Quite a change from when we first met, eh? Captain Chen, probably the original one, though at this point it was hard to tell, materialized beside him with 2 glasses of what she assured him was mostly stable quantum cocktails. You know, Zixtal clicked thoughtfully, accepting the drink despite his better judgment. When we first encountered your species, we thought you were insane. Taking the deadliest aspects of the universe and turning them into entertainment? It seemed like a recipe for disaster. And now? Chen's eyes twinkled with what might have been amusement or possibly trace amounts of Cherenkov radiation. Now I think we're beginning to understand. It's not about merely surviving the dangers of the universe. It's about embracing them, understanding them, and yes, maybe doing incredibly stupid things with them occasionally. But in doing so, we master them. That's the spirit. Chen raised her glass, which briefly existed in a superposition of empty and full states, to doing incredibly stupid things in the name of science, sport, and interspecies friendship. To incredibly stupid things, Zixtal agreed, clicking his mandibles in what had become an almost human-like smile. Though I do have one question. Yes? The temporal protection suits. They're not really rated for infinity, are they? Chen's grin turned mysterious. Let's just say they're rated for long enough for you to figure out how to avoid needing them. That's half the fun. As the party continued around them, breaking several laws of physics and at least one temporal causality regulation, Zixtal realized that his species had gained something far more valuable than just new sporting techniques. They had learned that survival wasn't the end goal. It was just the beginning. Somewhere in the background, Valara could be heard explaining to a group of enthusiastic humans how to combine temporal parkour with traditional Craxian combat dancing. The resulting temporal shockwaves would probably give the station's reality anchors a workout. But that was tomorrow's problem. Or yesterday's. Or both. Time was funny that way. The future. All of them. To be continued. Maybe in another timeline. You humans are absolutely insane, Grand Admiral Zixtal declared.